looked like a homemade grenade. Pulls the pin out, drops it at her feet, and as it hits the floor, I've come up on aim. I mean, it was too late anyway, so I'm getting blown up, but the threat was that high. You know, that instinct of your life flashes before your eyes, sort of thing. Your instinct is to react proportionately, and that to me was lethal. You know, lethal force from him, and the only way to respond to that is with lethal force.
Hello and welcome to Off Duty, the Derbyshire Constabulary podcast. Today we're joined by Matthew, who's one of our firearms officers.
Hello.
So we're going to get to know a bit about you. You've been in force for about 11 years, is that right?
Yeah, 11 years as a police officer. Last 6 years up to now being a firearms officer.
Great stuff. Well, it's going to be an interesting chat, I've no doubt.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Oh, please! Come to the front door! We shot some tasers, stay off!
Derbyshire Police, how can I help?
I've got a woman here covered in blood.
Anna is 1425 and I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder.
So, Matthew.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. There's a good reason as to why people won't be able to see your face, which is, unfortunate for people, but there is a good reason. Because you have anonymity as a firearms officer, don't you?
Yeah, that's a cover story. The real story is I've just got a face for radio, I think. But there's an anonymity element to being a firearms cop. As a bog standard armed response officer, and also there's some additional skills within firearms, close protection, something what we call MASTS, which is mobile arms support to surveillance, which is all covert work. I'm trained in that, so for that reason, obviously, my face being out in the public domain, and that is a massive conflict. That's a cover story I'm going with.
Hence the blurriness.
Yeah, the face for radio is the real story. Yeah.
And when you're out and about, obviously doing your day job, people may have seen armed cops turning up with balaclavas on or face coverings. Is that the same reason then, just keeping that anonymity?
Yeah, so the balaclavas aren't to frighten people. They're there for the anonymity. And I guess the only thing is, obviously we, as firearms officers, we've got a primary role, which is dealing with certain things, but we also attend, in this force especially, generic, policing incidents, domestic, supporting local divisions and stuff. And we don't just walk around in balaclava for 12 hours. So people do see our faces, but some of it can't be helped. With the scrutiny now, like social media, camera phones, technology, no doubt at some point, your face is going to end up on somewhere on social media if you attend incidents where there's a lot of people around. So it's just managing it the best you can. It's there to protect us, the anonymity sort of thing, in the event of you discharging a firearm at a job. If you think about a high-profile case in London recently, where that officer's name was released to the public, people putting bounties on his head and all sorts of really crazy stuff, which you don't want. Nobody comes to work to have to endure that. So
yeah, makes a lot of sense when you put it like that.
Yeah.
You are one of our most questioned people from the members of the public. So we've got a lot
I feel honoured.
A lot of questions to go at. Some of which actually you've sort of picked up on there. One of them is about that scrutiny from the public, actually, and how you deal with, when you're attending a job and you've got camera phones in your face immediately, that can be putting straight out, streamed live, can't it? How does that feel when you're attending a job and you've got to think about everything that's going on as a police officer, everything that's going on as a firearms officer, and then with that added sort of scrutiny and pressure that comes with public being there with a phone that might be live streaming?
It's sort of just become the norm. And you just have to accept that people have the right to film us. We're a public, a public-facing organisation, and we're in the public domain dealing with the public. A lot of the time, in times of distress, people don't ring police, do they? To tell us how good a day they're having. It's always the opposite. So you just have to, remember to like be yourself, be professional, and just do what you're there to do, and don't, I personally don't try and worry too much about who's filming me, because we carry body cameras anyway, because that gives us the protection of we've got nothing to hide on how we're conducting ourselves and what we're doing, and like how we're dealing with something. So it's only really an additional load of body cameras. I think the scrutiny now on police officers is so as high as it's ever been because of social media, camera phones, and you get these snippets of footage that don't always paint us in a great light, but you never get the context of what's happened. It's one of those things that's, with a lot of things, like in policing and like in life in general, I just think it's out of my control. I have to deal with it. It's one of those things. So I try not to focus too much on it and address it, and just it's like, it's happening. Deal with it. Just do your job.
That's where your training, I suppose, is.
Yeah.
Is that it? You work into your training. And that's,
yeah, exactly.
there
You always fall back on your training, how I've been trained. What if you follow that, like you don't need to be concerned about people filming you.
There's a number of questions around around the training and how you sort of get into it. Do you have to have had any experience in firearms at all? Like, did you have anything prior to going into the firearms world?
No. I joined the police because I wanted to be a firearms officer. That's what interested me. Apart from the odd air rifle in my mate's garden when I was like 8, shooting at tin cans or whatever, I'd never fired a gun in my life. Apart from once on a stag do, which, in a different country, which wasn't very moderated, so to speak. So yeah, I'd never handled a conventional firearm. I'd never fired a gun before.
What did it feel like first time you had that proper gun rather than a stag do gun?
Well, it felt like like shaking like a dog. Like the adrenaline, like, you don't know how it's going to feel when, you pull the trigger and the gun goes off, and yeah, a lot of adrenaline. So yeah, it's just one of them things that I had the knack for, and I didn't know until I'd give it a go.
So after you'd gone for that taste today, what then happened? Did you have to wait for a sort of intake to come through, or was it fairly quick after that?
To get on the unit, it's quite a long process, actually. It's probably the best part of 12 months from, right, I'm going to apply, to here I am ready to go. So you have to attend assessment days, which is just like general policing. They test your general policing skills. The highest sort of scoring ones will then be offered to come back and go on a weapons course, which is 3 weeks down at the range, and pistol shooting, carbine shooting, loads of time on the range, putting rounds down, different disciplines, different distances, and then some qualification shoots throughout those 3 weeks. And once you pass, I think you have to pass 2 qualification shoots on each weapon. And in that event, you're successful. So then you go away. If you're not a taser officer already, you have to go on a taser course, because we carry tasers, one of our less lethal options. Go for the tactics, which again varies in time, but is around 12 weeks. And the tactics we use as firearms cops is how to deal with subjects, I say subjects, people, in buildings, on foot, in vehicles. And you're constantly under assessment, not just how you perform on the scenarios, but how you conduct yourself. Because carrying a firearms officer in this country, it is a big responsibility, and you've got to have the right mindset for it. So after those 12 weeks, you're then technically an armed response officer. It took me a year from applying to here I am, fresh out the box, firearms cop, ready to go.
Are you still going back to sort of your day job then at that point when you have those breaks, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you'll do the weapons course, and then they'll send you back to your division for a bit, and you'll go and do your normal day job for a bit. Funnily, we had one of the lads who used to be on my shift. He was one of the lads who went back So for 6 months, he was on division as a response bobby, but qualified as a firearms cop. And he came in this one day, did overtime with our shift, coincidentally, the shift that he was coming on, and he knew that. And we had the most horrific day ever. It was like straight out the door, first thing, one firearms deployment to another. While we're on that deployment, the boss is ringing up. Yeah, I've got another job coming in Ilkeston. We've got 2 jobs, like multiple jobs running at once. Absolutely bedlam, but brilliant for us. Like it's what we want to do. We get to the end of the day, and we're like, mate, do not think that this is normal. This is great, but this is not what happens every day. Like, don't expect this when you come here. It is not one job to another constantly. That is not the life of a firearms cop, especially in a county force. Maybe if you work in the Met, but so yeah, he was like, "What the?" He was like, "This is amazing." It's not like this.
You just got it on a good day.
Yeah, just got it on a good day. It's like peaks and troughs. You have really busy days. That day we did. You have not so busy days because it ain't the Wild West and people aren't running. There ain't gunslingers running around shooting each other constantly, especially not in Derbyshire.
So another question from public is around fitness, because as a firearms cop, you're carrying a lot of kit, and there's a higher level of fitness that you have to achieve than a regular officer. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean we're tested yearly on the bleep test, and the level, excuse me, the level for a firearms officer is higher than response, and it's really important because your fitness will affect your decision making, and obviously decision making is a massive part of being a cop, but being a firearms cop, especially when you talk about like those split second decisions, when you're put under like stress physically, and then you get to a scenario in training and you're asked to make a split decision because your brain's working overtime, because your heart's beating out your chest, and because of your fitness, you will make a poor decision because you're not thinking rationally, because your brain's just panic. It's just in survival mode. Whereas if you are fit, you will make better decisions because you've not got to worry about that stress of, I'm absolutely fucked. And there's a man there and he's got a gun. And if he points that at me or someone else or presents a threat to somebody, I'm going to have to deal with it. But at the same time, you're thinking, I'm really fucked. So fitness is, in my opinion, people might tell you, other cops might tell you different, but in my opinion, it is so important in this job.
What sort of stuff do you do outside work? How do you keep fit?
CrossFit, mainly. I've been doing that about 10 years. You'll always know somebody who does CrossFit because they'll tell you.
Often the case.
Yeah, they'll tell you immediately. I'm surprised it's taken me this long.
Record, I think.
Yeah, so I've been doing that a long time, and that just that is just what suits me personally. It just gives me everything that I need to do this job: fitness, strength, everything. That's like my main. It's like a hobby. It's not a chore to me at all. I love going. I love it.
We've had a couple of questions in from one of your gym mates, Woody. But does it help having that sort of ability to switch off as well from work? It's a high pressured situation, and having mates at the gym that you can just turn off your brain around work stuff. Does that help?
Yeah, obviously it's a responsibility carrying firearms, at work in the police and stuff. One of the big positives about being a firearms officer is you turn up to work, you deal with whatever is happening that day, and then you go home, and you ain't got to think about, like what, apart from maybe the stuff you've been dealing with sometimes, or, jobs that you've been to that may have affected you emotionally or psychologically, whatever. But I get that. I've got a really good work-life balance at the moment, the way that we work with shifts and my home life. And having that, those hobbies outside of work, and I'm really lucky, and I've got a really good circle of friends, really good family. Having that is so important because it makes coming to work easier, because I know that what I'm going home to. And some of the stuff that you see, some of the family situations that you see in the police, or some of the, the levels of distress that people are in that you go and deal with, you think, how lucky am I to go home to what I've got?
Yeah, and it's brings nice on. So when you go through your training, you're ready to go. That was in 2020.
Yeah,
which was a year that I think probably most people would like to forget.
An interesting time.
How was it going into armed policing during a national lockdown?
It's quite a unique experience, really, because I was on my tactics course at the time, and it'd come to right to the end of the course. There was a few days left, and obviously this COVID thing is sort of bubbling, and then suddenly, bang, they announced the lockdown. So yeah, just went home that day, came back the Monday, to a very different situation. They moved everybody down to the training centre where we do all the training to get us out of the way, so that we didn't get infected with COVID by anybody, because there's no other places to get firearms officers from if COVID sort of spreading through the firearms unit. And for the first 3 months, we weren't allowed to go out to a single job, basically, in the fear that we would contract COVID and spread it to everybody else. So the instruction was basically from day one when I came on, do not leave the nick unless there's a firearms deployment. And because there was a national lockdown, nobody was out waving machetes in the street. Nobody was out shooting at each other. Nobody was out carrying firearms. So there wasn't any firearms deployments because there was nobody around. So yeah, for the first few weeks, we just sat there for 12 hours, just waiting for the call, which is not the norm at all. So it was a really bizarre time. And then once the restrictions started to get eased with the lockdown, it just went crazy, just absolutely crazy. Which
you
was
think with like people just sort of...
Oh yeah, it was like people like criminals like waiting to burst. Like I need to commit some criminal.
Opposite way around for you.
I need to do something criminal. So we had a period of a lot of involvement with a lot of things, firearms discharges, weapons, which is the norm of what we sort of deal with.
Can you remember that first proper job?
I remember my first ever deployment. Yeah. So top of Normanton Road, which is in sort of an area in Derby. I can't remember the ins and outs of the job, but there was some information that there was 3 lads in a car and they had a firearm. So we were authorised to obviously go and stop the car with a certain tactic. It was quite a dynamic tactic where we'll make the car stop and then we'll call the occupants out to make them surrender, basically peacefully, arrest them, tier medals, like, yeah, great job. So we go to Derby and we're looking for this car everywhere. And then eventually the tactical firearms commander, who is that's like the inspector that's in the control room, and they command a firearms operation from the control room. They decide on authorising us to go, deciding what the tactics are with tactical advice, etc. So the TFC rescinds the operation and says, we've looked and looked and looked, not found it. We need to now wait for some new information. So the authorities rescinded. Put your kit away, go and debrief, whatever. We'll go to St Mary's Wharf, which is one of the nicks. We'll put the kit away. We'll have a cup of tea. We'll have a chat about the operation. So we still had the weapons out. So we pull up at these traffic lights in all 1, 2, 3 cars, and suddenly the car just rolls in front of us. And it's like, there it is. So quickly we shout up on the radio like, yeah, boss, we've got the car. You need to authorise us right now. And she's like, yeah, go. And we just do this stop on this crossroads at the top of Pear Tree, really busy, middle of the day. Initiate the tactic and get these 3 lads to surrender out of this car. And I was like, this is what I came to do. like locking up dangerous offenders, violent offenders, whatever. So yeah, finally, it took a while, but it came, and then
It's not stopped.
yeah, it was like buses. You wait for one, and then quite a few came at once.
What was it like rolling out Nick first time? Gun on your hip. Was that? I mean, you'd have had that first time when you were driving a police car.
Yeah.
I imagine it was. Was it a different feeling? Did it feel different?
No, it's similar. It's similar, that apprehension, that excitement, wanting to go out and, like do your job. And yeah, it's not, I can only speak sort of individually for how I felt, but it's not something that like sort of weighed on me massively. It's not lost on me, the responsibility of having a firearm and being responsible for, if something, if something really, really serious happens, that I'm going to be the one that goes to deal with it. I was excited, and as firearms officers, we don't get paid anymore. There's no incentive to carry that responsibility financially. It's not like, I get loads more money. Danger money, as people ask me all the time. Someone asked me yesterday, like, do you get danger money? I was like, what even is that? No, you don't. It's there's no financial incentives. It's just simply, I grew up in Derbyshire, and I represent the police in Derbyshire in the communities that like I and other people grew up in, and like it's sort of like a bit of a cliche thing, but I just like locking bad guys up. And those most violent people in the community could affect my family or your family or anybody's family. I want to stop them from doing that. So that's why I put myself forward to take that responsibility. Not because, I want to show off because I've got a gun. That couldn't be further from the truth for me. I want the most violent people in the community. That's what I want to deal with. Yeah, there's always that excitement of when you do sort of something for the first time, but like I say, it's not something personally that massively weighed down on me, because I knew I wanted to do it, and I wanted to carry that responsibility. And for me personally, like having that responsibility sort of like sharpens me. It's like when the pressure's on, like that's when I like come alive a little bit at work. Do you know what I mean? Suddenly, just like there's this flick of a switch. It's like, right, it's time to switch on. Got to go and do our job.
And when you're attending an incident, what's the sort of bar for those different levels of force to be used? Because you've talked about, obviously you've got the same level of sort of force use that you can have as a regular cop. You've got taser. You talked about not like less lethal options as well.
Yeah.
All the way up to that sort of final decision.
Yeah.
How does that work when you're at a job?
So our firearms operation works is that something will be reported into the control room. That information, like the staff in the control room, if there's something within that information that they think this needs to be looked at by the force incident manager, which is the inspector that runs the control room, and they will authorise firearms operations. So it'll go to them, they'll review it, and they'll make a decision. Right, I'm going to authorise and send the armed response vehicles, the ARVs, or I'm not, based on, and it's their assessment of the threat. So they will contact over the airwave the operational firearms commander, the OFC, which I am one of, and they'll say, got this job, you're authorised, get the kit out. So we'll get all the kit out, and that involves taser, what is called an AEP launcher. I don't know what AEP stands for, I can't remember. But it's effectively the baton gun, fires like a rubber round, which is classed as a less lethal option. And then primary weapon, which is the carbine, the big long firearm. And we carry the pistol as a standing authority anyway, and that's for self-protection and that like sudden presentation of a threat where you haven't got time to get in the car and get the kit out. You've got something to deal with, So we'll have all the tactics, determined by TFC. Then the OFC, who's on the ground. So in my case, if I was the OFC, I would then determine how I'm going to carry that plan out. So the TFC will give me the plan. This is what I want to achieve. This is the tactic, and this is how I want you to achieve it. And then I will make that happen on the ground with the team, and then we'll go and deal with it. And in terms of the use of force, obviously, that's all covered by, like legislation and policy. But lethal force is the absolute last resort for everything. And that's why we have all those other options, because everything that we'll deal with is some level of conflict management. And, to give reassurance to anybody who's listening, like, we deal with most things with just communication. By just, the presence of us there and how we communicate with people, the majority of stuff we go to ends in a peaceful resolution. If that doesn't resolve it, we will try every other option we have at our disposal before using lethal force. Me or my colleagues or another member of the public, their life is in danger, then we have that capability to use lethal force if we need to.
And have you been in a position where that was something that could have happened?
There's been one occasion where I've been really close to pulling the trigger. We'd gone to an address right up in the High Peak area of the county, middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning, and we're containing this address, which effectively means, we're surrounding it, sterile, keeping it sterile away from other people. And there's a male in there who's obviously in some like really high level of mental distress or lacking some mental capacity sort of thing. So due to how the risk that he posed, it was a firearms operation, because normal response officers didn't have the kit and capability to deal with his potential threat, what he could potentially do to them or other members of the public. We're trying obviously to get him to come out and surrender, and that it's unsuccessful. Effectively, after quite a long period of time, the TFC decides that we're going to go in. There's some sort of change in information, and we need to go in and deal with whatever threat he's posing inside. So we go forward to the door, and we're sort of stacked up on the door, as in like we're set ready to force the door and go in. And I'm at the front with my carbine, pointing at the door, and sort of to the right is like a big like bay window with the little windows at the top, and one of them was open. And as we sort of set up ready, I just say to one of the lads, just watch that window because it's open. At which point, all I see is a hand appear with what looks like to me like a hand grenade, pulls the pin out, and then just drops it at her feet. And the only reason, like in hindsight, I think the only reason I haven't pulled the trigger is because the time it's taken for me to go from that position to up on aim on this male, the other side of this window, is it during that time, the grenade's fallen, and as it hits the floor, just like a puff of smoke comes out the bottom. At which point, I was just, the sense of relief was, because I just thought it was a grenade. Looked like a grenade, looked like a homemade grenade. Pulls the pin out, drops it at her feet, and as it hits the floor, I've come up on aim. I mean, it was too late anyway, so I'm getting blown up, but the threat was that high. I was going to, neutralise him. You
don't know what else he's got inside?
Well, no. And that, that instinct of your life flashes before your eyes sort of thing. Your instinct is to react proportionately. And that to me was lethal force from him. And the only way to respond to that is with lethal force. So at the point I've come up, like the smoke comes out the back, and obviously in my brain I realised that it's not a grenade. But everybody obviously dived backwards. One of the lads knocked this red recycling bin over, which was top topped with glass bottles that are smashed everywhere, and it were all like rolling, like diving out of the way. And then sort of that sense of relief of it's just smoke. But at the time, in that like split second, now like I say, had I been already sort of on aim with him, I'd have pulled the trigger, and all that has happened in seconds. But to me, I can relive it in a number of everything like really slows down. It's what they call perceptual distortion. Everything slows down and you notice the minute details of things. And yeah, but that's sort of the only occasion where I've been really close.
What was the effect on you? Like with that, you said about that, you can remember it very well.
Yeah, so a lot of adrenaline. But obviously after that, we still had to sort of recompose ourselves and still deal with the threat. It was still posing a threat. And at this point, like, what else has he got in there now? Obviously, it was right in the high peak, so probably an hour or so away from headquarters, coming towards the end of the shift. And on the night, I'd been driving, and we're driving back, and like everything had just all the adrenaline and everything had just gone. And I said to my crewmate, like, I either need to pull up, or you need to drive, because I cannot keep my eyes open physically. It was pitch black, in the high peak. Like, I couldn't keep the car like in a straight line. So we swap over, and I get in the passenger seat, and I just fall asleep immediately, like just gone. And I wake up when we pull back up here. I don't know, 3/4 of an hour later. So yeah, physically that level of stress. Bearing in mind I haven't discharged my firearm. In the immediacy, it has an effect on you.
And afterwards,
Yeah. So I mean, it's not something that I think about routinely, but you do sometimes sit. You sometimes sit and think, well, if that had been a real grenade, I'd be dead now. Because there's nothing any of us could do about it. We're in such close proximity, and obviously, if he had that capability, I know it's so rare for
but we have seen it.
Yeah,
it is literally happened. That scenario has happened.
It has happened. So it's not something I dwell on, but it's something that I think as an officer in general, not just a firearms officer, that can happen. That every day you go to work, like you might not go home, but it's the profession that I chose, and it's the risk I'm willing to carry coming to work. And yeah, but obviously there are people in this force that have discharged the firearm. Obviously, you mentioned the Ascot Drive job earlier, which I won't go into detail because I know the officers involved, obviously. But I've seen the effect that it has on them. It's had on them, like afterwards, both of them. There are obviously after effects of such an incident, because I've seen it, firsthand on how it's affected those members of staff.
And for those that don't know, obviously there was a full inquest into that incident, and it was deemed a proportionate use of force for the risk that was posed. But you're still human at the end of the day, aren't you?
But still, even though those officers did, exactly what they've been asked of as per their training, it's still, it doesn't matter how much training you have, that doesn't take away what you've got to deal with emotionally and psychologically afterwards. You've been asked the ultimate question as a firearms cop, and you've answered it. But they still have to, regardless of that, they've still got to deal with, I imagine it probably still affects them today. And it was, 4 years ago. Every day as a firearms officer, you come to work, and I never come to work wanting to shoot anybody, and I hope I never do in my career.
That's the best career you can have, I suppose.
Yeah, but I'm willing to if the situation arises, and that's the sort of the mindset that you have to have, that you don't want to, but if you have to, you're willing to, and that's I guess that's the difference between people who become firearms officers and people who don't.
And they're right. We talked about that small number, both within the force and nationally. There there are other, countries, America being the most obvious, but others on the continent where officers are routinely armed, and there have been calls around actually that should be something that should be in the UK. What are your thoughts about that side of things?
I think, and again, this is only speaking from my personal opinion in what knowledge I have of America, which isn't a lot, but I'm only forming it on, like my own judgments. I don't speak on behalf of the unit for this or anybody else who carries a firearm. But the UK and America is just so. I know we're both Western countries, but they're so different. Like the Americans, they are dealing with such a different level of threat than what I mean, the laws, the legislation is so different to the UK. My personal opinion is I don't think all officers should routinely carry firearms for a number of reasons, in that I don't think it warrants it.
In terms of that risk that is posed from number of
Yeah.
firearms.
Yeah. If they maintain the amount of firearms officers we have and increase it for the one, not every cop needs to carry a firearm, in my opinion. And not every cop wants to carry a firearm.
Not every cop wants to carry a taser.
No. I think the sort of the dynamics of the people that you would recruit into the police if you had to carry a firearm would be very different to what we've got.
Yeah. And you think fundamentally as well, I suppose, that the country's very different in that there isn't the routine handling of firearms by the general public.
No.
And that it's always quite jarring, I think, when you go, particularly, you might go plane ride an hour and a half over to France and there are armed cops immediately. It always feels quite jarring to see that immediately.
Yeah. And, if... I don't agree with the notion that if, like obviously violent offending, if there's an increase in that, and the answer is we'll just give every cop a gun. That's not a world that we want to go into, is it, as a country? You don't want to... Nobody wants shootouts in the street between cops and cops and...
Robbers.
Cops and members of the public. Nobody wants that, do they? And if you increase the amount of firearms, that's only going to increase the chances of cops discharging firearms, and not necessarily with the same level of training that we have, So the issue around weapons and violence in this country, I think, it's a more complex issue that isn't dealt with by fighting fire with fire, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? There's preventative root causes that, why we've got teenagers running around with machetes stabbing each other. And, that the answer to that is not, well, just give every cop a gun. Not in my opinion.
You need the capability to deal with it when it occurs, but
Yeah, of course.
the actual...
Yeah. But preventing that going forward is not about arming cops. That's not the answer to it. It's about, stopping teenagers from wanting or feeling the need to carry machetes out in the public domain or firearms in the first place. That's the answer. But that's a lot more complex issue than let's give everybody a pistol. So that's what I take on it. I just think, people make close comparisons with the US and the UK, and they're so different. The culture is so different. The mindset is so different over there. You can go to a supermarket and buy a semi-automatic weapon in America. You can't do that in Morrison's.
By potato peeler.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
You also mentioned earlier on that you do some other work, so it's not just rolling around Derbyshire. There's some outside force work as well.
So I think one of the benefits of working for Derbyshire, a smaller force, so to speak, in Derbyshire, is that there is a number of specialist skills within firearms. Rifle, self-explanatory. Covert world, which is all covert work, working with surveillance teams, and it's effectively a protective bubble around the surveillance if they're compromised, which I'm trained in, hence the reason why I'm facing, can't see my face. And then close protection, which I'm also trained in. So I did my course, which is an additional course to your firearms training. It's another 5 weeks for the close protection stuff. Within 6 months, the Queen passed away. So obviously there was a really high-profile event in London, and I think every close protection officer in the country trained at that time had to go down because the amount of people that would qualify for protection were attending. You know,
And it was quick as well, wasn't it?
it was. Yeah, within days. Yeah, obviously she passed away on, I can't remember what the day was, but within 24 hours, you know, people were on the phone like, "Can you go to London tomorrow?" You don't know how long you're going for, but it's going to be at least a week or so. Joe Biden was the president of the US at the time, and he stayed at the US ambassador's residence, which is on the back of London Zoo. So they shut off the whole road because he was staying there. So it's like a fortress. We were basically based there as like a venue team to sort of help manage that site with like Secret Service. So they were everywhere, Secret Service.
What was it like working with them? That must have been...
It was all right, actually. They're quite forward, aren't they? And, you know, first thing some guy comes up to me and is like, "Oh, yeah, I like your suit." And I'm thinking, it's from Matalan. It's the only one I had at the time. I've literally just come off my course. I've not had time to buy another, and I'm here. I've got a Matalan suit on, but thank you. Yeah, they were all right. And I expected them to be like really like, you know, not wanting anything to do with us, UK cops, you know. But we got quite involved with them and quite chatty, and they involved us. And yeah, it was, you know, although it was like it was a really tragic event, it was a really good experience in terms of working with other forces, you know, London, where you don't, you know, I don't know well, and very different side of policing to, you know, what I normally do. So far away from being a response cop at Chesterfield, where I started, or being a firearms officer in Derbyshire, you know, like mooching around Derby and, you know, other areas, you know, conducting, you know, like firearms operations and normal police work, to going down there and doing that was like a really good experience.
Quite an honour as well to be part of.
Yeah,
you know, those
some of
events.
that, something that I'm really proud of, and like my family are, you know, really proud as, you know, everything that I've done in the police, they're really positive about it. But that sort of stuff, especially because it's stuff that you will always sort of talk about and remember.
Well, Matthew, thank you so much for your time. It's been fascinating, and I'm sure everyone listening's had a great insight into a world that they probably had no idea about outside of Sunday night telly, I'd imagine.
Yeah, podcasts are something that I listen to. That's why I was sort of interested to do it, and it's nice to give that insight. Hopefully, it changes some people's mindsets a little bit. If I go to an incident and there's somebody there who's, you know, adamant that they don't like police for whatever reason, the past experiences, whatever, like I see that as a challenge to change their mind. Because if I can come away from that incident and I've put even a little bit of thought in their mind, thinking, actually, he was all right, and maybe police aren't as bad as I thought, like I've achieved something there. Do you know what I mean? So I go with that mindset with people who don't like the police, in that, well, maybe I can change their mind. So hopefully this might have changed people's minds a little bit, seeing like a bit of a human side to, you know, what they see when we turn up. Maybe not. Maybe I'll get an absolute bashing on social media, but so be it.
If there was one thing for the people listening, watching, that from your role that would, I suppose, possibly make your life easier, make people safer, what would be that? I mean, don't have a gun, I suppose, would probably be the top one. But what would be things that you've seen? What would be your message to people about that?
Just like remembering that, you know, we as police officers, you know, we come to work to do our job well, like everybody else does, and we are there to help people, which I think people don't always see. They think the police turn up and they think, oh, here we go. You know, we just want to resolve whatever's happening. And we just want to, like they do, go home and do the stuff that they like doing, and spending time with friends and family. That's all we want to do. We just go home at the end of the day, having done a good job. Do you know what I mean? So,
well, Matthew, thank you again for your time, and best of luck with the rest of the career, wherever that takes you.
Yeah.
Wishing you many safe shifts tonight,
tonight.
And in the future.
Starting tonight, in charge of the team.
Thank you ever so much, and thanks for listening. This was Off Duty, the Derbyshire Police podcast. You can send us your questions to podcast@derbyshire.police.uk, and we'll get them asked of the people in force. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.